Hi guys, welcome back. In today's episode of Among the Greats, we're going to be taking a look at Rivarossi's legendary GG-1 and their American Railroad GG-1 in particular. We'll be taking a look at the detail, the mechanism, and in my opinion, what makes them such legendary locos. So without any further ado, let's get straight into the video. Now, let's talk about some of the details that sets the Rivarossi model in particular apart from all that came before it. So first of all, Rivarossi as a company is known for making some of the more obscure designs in railroad history. Such examples of this include the Y6B, the cab forward, and even some more obscure diesels like the Fairbanks Morris Sealiner. Now, before the Rivarossi model of the GG-1 rolled around, you weren't left with too many options. One of the options that one could look for if they were interested in a GG-1 was the penline model. However, like some other models of the GG-1 that came along around the time of the penline one, they were very short in length. Now, to my knowledge, and please again correct me if I'm wrong about this, Rivarossi's model that was imported by AHM was the first fully scale-length GG-1. Now, Penline and other companies had their own reasons as to why they had to shorten their engines, the main one being turn radius, of course. But Rivarossi managed to engineer their engines with articulating trucks in a way that they did not have to shorten the actual car body. Now, the rest of the dimensions of Rivarossi's GG-1 are actually pretty faithful to the prototype. Now, looking at pictures of 4902 in particular, we'll get a little bit into the significance of that engine in just a couple seconds. One would notice that the flared radiators that are mounted right around here on the streamlined car body are missing. This, to my knowledge, is the only major difference to the prototype than what the Rivarossi GG-1 offers. If we move to the top of the engine, you see that they actually bothered to model somewhat accurate prototype pantographs, on these engines, and they look pretty good. Keeping them down a little bit is a little bit of a challenge, but if you get it right, they stay down pretty well. And also, they do spring. So if you do have catenary, or I probably butchered that pronunciation, you do have wires on your layout and want to run it like that, they definitely have enough spring to do so. Also visible on the roof is a air horn and some roof detail on the top there. Now, the GG-1 in particular was known to be streamlined, so it's not going to have as many separately applied details as something like a New York Central T-motor, but the Rivarossi model does have quite a bit of molded on stuff to offer. On the front here, we have molded on handrails and step detail. The pilot itself also looks pretty professional and well done. Now, the underframe detail is where the Rivarossi model really shines in my opinion. You have separately molded axle caps for each individual wheel, and we'll get into the drive system with these guys in just a little bit. And moving back, we have the trailing truck, and actually GG-1 means 460, 460 the first. So the G-Class Pennsylvania engines were 460s, and the GG-1 was the first 460 electric out there. It's just a random fun fact for those of you that didn't know. And coming around in front, we see identical detail as to the back. Got a nice set of marker lights right there, if that's what they're called. Molded on grills right on the side of the engine. Actually do look pretty good, especially on the sliding angle. And right here we see the two doors on the side of the engine, also looking pretty darn sharp for the time period. And that's about it. There's really not much more detail you could ask for out of a streamlined car body, and Rivarossi actually did a pretty good job considering this engine only hit the American market in 1970. Now at this point, the keen-eyed among you may have noticed that this GG-1 in particular, being that 4902, is not in the typical paint schemes of the GG-1 wore in service, that being either Pennsylvania, Penn Central, Amtrak, or Conrail. Now, this engine is special because it's wearing the American Railroads paint scheme. Now, the American Railroads paint scheme itself has a little bit of history to it. So let's cast our mind back to the springtime of 1969. The High Iron Company, which was essentially a charter rail journey travel agency, offered a special rail journey from New York to Promontory Point in Utah. This was commemorating the 100th anniversary of the joining of the Transcontinental Railroad, those two railroads being the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific. And thus, this traveled all across the US and linked basically the West Coast Federation with the East Coast. 100 years previously at Promontory Point was of course the driving with the golden spike, and that paint scheme kind of reflected into this one. Now, Robert Lawrence of Fremont in Ohio was the guy who was responsible for this paint on both 4902, the GG-1, and 759, which was the Berkshire that was painted up in a very similar paint scheme. Now on the side of the engine, right here, you can see a golden spike, and 1869 and 1969, commemorating the 100 years that passed between it. Now, this paint scheme itself was kind of short-lived. It only lasted on 4902, and after the Centennial Special, which was the GSL, Golden Spike Limited, 4902 continued its normal duties on the New York to Washington line, wearing this paint scheme for only a brief amount of time. It's kind of a shame, really, because in my opinion, this is a very pretty paint scheme, and I would have kind of liked to see more GG-1s painted up like this to kind of commemorate the occasion. So now that we've had a look at the shell detail and some history on 4902 in particular, let's have a look at the drive system that Rivarossi put on their GG-1s, and in my opinion, what makes them so great. Now, most Rivarossis have the reputation of being slightly mechanically overbuilt, and in the case of the GG-1, in my opinion at least, they did a pretty good job keeping this simple. The first thing you're going to see is the classic Rivarossi 3-pole motor right there. Now people kind of have mixed opinions about these, but I've had pretty good experiences. The only thing you have to really look out for is the wear on your brushes. In this case, it's pretty easy to see that these are almost brand new, so they're in pretty good shape. Other than that, they're pretty bomb-proof motors, and there actually isn't too much gear reduction going on here, which is one of the only complaints that I hear about the GG-1s. Now, the motor worm gear is sent right here in between axles 1 and 2, and axles 1, 2, and 3 are connected by gears of the exact same ratio. So that means, in layman's terms, that this thing is geared like an absolute stallion. Let me show you what I mean by that. So you may be thinking to yourself, that looks like a reasonable speed. I don't know what he's going on about. And you're right, that is a very reasonable speed. However, that is about 25% power. And yes, I am using an auto pulse, so I'm outputting a little bit more voltage than some other power packs. Let's take it up to 50. That thing is now breaking Mach 1. And yes, that is 50% power. That's about 60 right there. And that's about as fast as I'd ever want to take a Rivarossi GG-1, because I'm pretty sure it's going faster than a 104 at this point. Anyway, let's bring her back to a stop. Now, as you could tell, these don't make a whole lot of noise if they are set up correctly. Now, for maintenance, there aren't a whole lot of things you have to do. You may want to put a tiny drop of oil on the motor bearing at the top. Other than that, just make sure that the motor is running very nice and smooth. Make sure that you have a little bit of lubricant in the drive truck right here, because, of course, another thing I really like about Rivarossi is that all of their gears are metal. You don't have any gear cracking. The trade-off there is that they are a little bit louder. However, as you heard, this one's almost dead silent. So, the other notable quirk in this mechanism is this metal tab right here. Now, the people who are experienced with electric engines may note that this means that the pantographs are actually active, and that is correct. Each pantograph is connected via a wire on the bottom of the shell, and this metal tab simply contacts that. So if you do have wires running along the top of your layout, and if you want to add that extra bit of realism, Rivarossi has given you that opportunity right out of the factory. Now, there is no directional lighting in this model. Both the bulbs light up when the engine's in motion. However, other than that, it's a very straightforward, very simple mechanism. There are 3 packs of weights located at the ends and in the middle, and overall it's a very well-built mechanism. Pretty bomb-proof. If you see these at a show, definitely pick them up. You can get them to run very well, and as long as you keep your throttle below about 30%, they are very smooth and very reliable runners.